Susan Linn is a psychologist, a child advocate, a ventriloquist who worked with Fred Rogers. She virtually invented puppet therapy, worked with cancer patients at Children's Hospital using puppets. She is the founder of the Campaign for Commercial-Free Childhood, which is now called Fair Play, and is the author of three important books: Consuming Kids, The Case for Make-Believe, and most recently, Who's Raising the Kids? Big Tech, Big Business, and the Lives of Children. Susan has written for several magazines, including The Prospect. And among her achievements as a child advocate, she convinced Disney to stop marketing Baby Einstein to babies on the premise that it had any educational value. And she worked with the FTC to prevent Google from monetizing information on kids that Google had gotten through YouTube Kids. More importantly, Susan has been my friend for more than 40 years. I'm Bob Kuttner. I'm one of the founding editors of the American Prospect. And Susan, let me start by asking you, Consuming Kids was published almost 2 decades ago. So what has worsened in the last 2 decades that persuaded you that there needed to be yet another book on this?
The technology. I mean, the technology didn't get worse. It got better. It got more powerful. It made marketing more to children more confusing, more omnipresent, more invasive than it ever was before. I mean, in 2004, the major concern was television, and that was powerful enough, but the new technologies are just so much more powerful.
So what are some examples of that and how they are abused? I mean, and is it the medium or is it the message or is it both?
It's both. I mean, basically, it's the combination of this incredibly seductive and addictive technology with that's unregulated, and that combination is really, what's a disaster for children. And it's a problem on so many levels. I mean, it affects children's health, but even more than that, I think we have to remember that marketing, it doesn't just sell products, it sells values as well. And one thing I think that people don't think about enough is that the values of commercialism, the values of consumer capitalism are really antithetical to democratic values. So we're immersing kids in this culture that tells them that me first is more important than cooperation, that encourages them to impulse buy, that encourages them, not to think and to consume, which, given the, crisis of global warming we have on this planet, is basically encouraging kids to adopt values that will ultimately destroy themselves and the planet.
So it isn't just the evil of screen time per se, although that's part of the story, but it's the use of screen time by big corporations to hook kids either as the product or as the buyer or on behalf of more commercialism.
Yeah, it's, I mean, screen time in and of itself is not evil. I mean, I worked in television. I worked, with Fred Rogers. I think that allowing, children to access to really good stories that are acted out, can be really powerful and good for them. But the problem is the business model. In television, it was, 30-second commercials. But now what with the tech companies, the tech companies are in a war for our attention, and attention matters more than anything else. So what they want to do is hook us, but also hook our children 24/7 and keep them glued to the screen. And the content on screens is supported by advertising. So it's not, I mean, people, accuse me of being anti-tech or anti-screen. I'm not. I'm anti the business model.
Right. Now, this also affects parents. You were telling me an absolutely hair-raising story about a game that is being marketed to parents, the essence of which is parents humiliate their kids. It's not a game. It's
No.
a thing that parents can do. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that's something that I've been taking a deep and disturbing dive into. Basically, pranks are big on social media. Um, make, practical jokes, the purpose of which is to fool somebody, make somebody look silly, surprise them, and all of that. And you can think that's good or not good for adults doing it to adults. But what's happening on TikTok and other social media sites is that parents who it looks like to me are primarily trying to be influencers, who can monetize their families, are doing that by quote pranking their kids. And the pranks, I mean, pranking older kids who are old enough to understand the joke. Again, you can think that's good or not, but there are parents doing this to babies and toddlers and preschoolers who don't have the cognitive wherewithal to really understand what's happening. So, for instance, there's this there's an app that can change what you look like. And so this father posted a video of him holding his baby on his lap, and his face morphed into like a cartoon creature donkey, and the child was terrified, screaming. I mean, they're purposely wearing like coming upon a baby suddenly with a mask, and that's anti positive development. I mean, babies are in the process of learning what's stable in the world, and learning to trust their parents, and then to have their parents suddenly disappear and become a terrible monster is really frightening, and the babies cry. I mean, there's another awful challenge. It's called the poop challenge, and parents pretend to get fake poop on their toddlers. And again, that's exactly anti-positive development. Toddlers are in the process of, either moving up to toilet training or being toilet trained. They're learning that they're not supposed to touch poop. And then when they find that it's on them, they're terrified. And it kind of it goes on like that. I mean, right, because school just recently started, there was this challenge on TikTok called Meet Your Teacher. And again, with older kids, I don't know, but for kids just starting kindergarten, to have their parents call them to their phone and say, your teacher wants to FaceTime with you, and then show them this horribly deformed and frightening face is terrifying. And at first, when I was looking into it, I thought it was like just parents. But as I've been looking more closely, a lot of the parents doing this are parents who are either already monetizing their families or are hoping to be able to do it by getting millions of views.
So let's unpack this some more.
Okay.
I mean, the fundamental point is that all of this perverse behavior is being driven by commercialism. Somebody makes a buck off of this. So in this case, TikTok benefits from the proliferation of this form of sadistic play. How does TikTok benefit?
TikTok benefits because it draws views, and TikTok, like other social media sites, makes its money through advertising.
Right.
So the more views, the more advertising there is. So
Right.
that's,
So
I mean,
TikTok is promoting a use of, let's call it social media, that is perverse for child development. And then it's seducing parents to play along with this on the premise that parents can monetize their kids.
right.
So it's a double
It's,
seductiveness that is horrible for the kids.
yeah, also maybe triple, because what it also does is normalize behavior which should not be normalized. It normalizes hurting kids or frightening kids. I mean, I
So,
saw this one influencer who having his baby on his lap, and he rigged the technology so what people on the screen were seeing was a plane crashing from the inside of the plane. And it's a baby. The baby can't recognize what's on the screen, but the father gets more and more agitated. Oh no, I'm going to save you. I won't let them hurt you, blah, blah, blah. And the child, picking up the father's emotion, just, sobs. He does the same thing with the roller coaster. It's just so phenomenally cruel. And what the father posts is, oh, my son is such a good actor. But his son wasn't acting. He was really terrified. And
okay.
and we don't, I mean, there's almost, I'm sorry, you were going to say
No, no,
something.
no, continue. I mean, this is
Okay.
hair raising. Keep talking.
We we have just about no laws to protect children online. Um, there are a couple of bills in Congress that, if they would pass, could protect kids in terms of their privacy um, and also stop personalized advertising, targeted advertising directed at kids. Those are really important. Although my understanding is that the bill that passed in California just didn't stand up in court.
What I
So
was,
that's really,
yeah,
pardon?
that's what I was going to ask you about. So, I mean, when you succeeded in getting Disney to stop marketing Baby Einstein as something that was educational for babies, you used a combination of publicity and shaming and use of allies in government. That was simple compared to, I mean, it was an extraordinary achievement,
Yeah. And
but
also a threatened lawsuit.
right, but the
Yeah.
evil was easy to understand, easy to grasp, and once you refuted the premise, or you got scientific research to refute the premise that this was actually good for kids, you succeeded in getting Disney to stand down. This is more insidious. This kind of stuff is harder because parents are enlisted as allies. It's not just that they think this is going to make their kids smarter. It's that they must have a sense that they're humiliating their kids, but they're monetizing their children. So what's the remedy for this?
Um, we the remedy for this is really complicated. Um, I I think that where the law stands now is that companies are not responsible for the content that they post. So, and it seems like, given a recent Supreme Court decision, that trying to hold them responsible, that's going to be an uphill climb right now. And the laws that are being proposed are about design. They're not about content. And and that that's that's going to be a problem. We I believe in the First Amendment. Believe me. It's important. But I think that the First Amendment issues would prevent this content from being regulated.
Let me
That's my sense.
a
Um,
ray of
I
optimism here. So this is the famous Section 230 of the FCC, where um, digital players, digital platforms are excused from being held responsible for content. Now, in fact, you've got an interesting left-right coalition because a lot of conservative Republicans are very anti-big tech, mostly for the wrong reasons. I mean, they're anti-big tech because big tech supports Democrats politically more than they support Republicans. So you've got a number of Republicans who want to rein in big tech. And I would assume, you would know this better than I, there are probably some traditional family values people who recognize that this is not good for families, that this is sadistic. And then you've got the fact that TikTok happens to be Chinese. So you've got the fact that there are people in both parties who want to rein in China. So, I mean, do you see any hope that the particular provision of the Federal Communications Act that holds digital platforms harmless for content, no matter how harmful the content is, might be altered?
I wish I were optimistic about it. I think we have to keep working towards that and pushing for that kind of thing. But I think it's an uphill climb. One thing about what the parents are doing that we could do that wouldn't be political or caught up in the courts is do a massive public health campaign around child development and what children need and young children, particularly. I mean, right now the big focus in tech, and there's a lot of concern about teenagers and depression and social isolation, teenage suicides, and the way that teens are exploited on social media. That's getting a lot of play. There's a lot of activism about it. There's concern in Congress about that. But I think that we need to start with babies. Young children are not getting, they're getting a raw deal right now anyway in this country. And and the fact that the focus is on teenagers, that's important. But people just don't understand child development. They never learn it. It's not taught in schools. I mean, it should be mandatory, a course in high school, a course in college, where people really learn about how children develop and what babies need and that kind of thing. So, I mean, that's something that would not solve the privacy issues or the personalized advertising issues, which are huge and problematic. But we really could do something to get the message about what kids need out to parents. And why I'm not just because of what those parents are doing on, not just TikTok, but YouTube and Twitter as well. Not just because of that, but because, there's mounting evidence that putting babies in front of screens for long periods of time is really harmful to their brain development. What the brain research is showing is that it affects parts of their brain that are linked to executive function, the capacity to begin a task and bring it to completion. That's a really, really important skill, and self-regulation. That's another, thing that another attribute that seems to be being undermined in babies who spend a lot of time with screens. And so putting a baby for 5 minutes in front of a screen, that's not going to harm the baby. But the problem is that it's hard to keep it at 5 minutes. And it's so powerful. And the babies, just glom onto it. They just glom onto screens. And so now if you go to YouTube and you search for videos for babies, there are tons of them that come up that claim things like, we can stop your baby from crying. We will teach your baby to speak, language development. When, in fact, what the research tells us is that babies can't learn language from a machine. It has to be in relation to a person. So the tech companies, starting with infants, are coming between parents and children, and in a way claiming to be able to parent the kids. And your baby will learn things so you can get a break. I mean, that's basically, the message. And the problem is it probably will stop babies from crying. It's so mesmerizing. It's just not good for them.
Well, and this is connected to other policy failures. So if we had decent pre-kindergarten programs,
right,
and decent childcare or paid family and medical leave, parents would not be so strung out. Parents could spend more time with their kids and not frantically stash the kid in front of the screen in the hope of just amusing the kid so the kid will shut up so that the parent can do what the parent has to do. So the two things, it seems to me, feed on each other. I mean,
yes,
parents don't have the time and peace of mind to be good parents. And so here is this incredibly compelling babysitting device that turns out to be bad for child development.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, corporations are very good at finding glitches in society and marketing products that claim to fix them. This is old, but the tech companies are certainly doing that by, claiming, that all sorts of technology is educational for children, for young children, often without research, showing that it is. But also, I really feel for parents today. I mean, it's just never been harder to be a parent because there is this incredibly powerful, seductive, commercialized culture that is undermining a parent's relationship with their children. And you're right. I mean, quality childcare. And there are some states that actually do have laws that say that there can be no screen time for kids under 2, but it's not all the states, and I don't know how much that's being enforced actually. anyway. So you're right. I mean, and that's why I keep saying this isn't a family problem, it's a societal problem.
One of your books was titled The Case for Make-Believe. And I think one of the things I've learned from you over the years is the importance of play in child development. And screen time is the antithesis of authentic play, in which the child is following the child's own imagination with other children or with parents. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's not necessarily a screen that's the problem. I mean, when I was writing the case for make believe, and I was, really urging, parents to cut back on children's screen time, encourage creative play. I realized that in my own childhood, screen media just was incredibly important to me. I mean, I became a ventriloquist because of television. My parents were not ventriloquists. That watching a ventriloquist on television, that was inspirational to me. And so I became a ventriloquist. I tried it out myself. And then there was Peter Pan, which had come out in the theaters. And I'm dating myself, but Flash Gordon, which was on television. And I went to see Peter Pan and was completely enraptured by that character and that story. And the same was true with Flash Gordon. And those two media programs inspired years of creative play for me and my friends. And so I thought, how can I be such a hypocrite? I mean, what's the difference? And it took me a while to sort it out, but there was a difference, and the difference is access. I saw Peter Pan in the movie theater when I was 6, and I didn't see it again until I was 19. Flash Gordon came on maybe once a year for a few years. But what happens today is that kids may see a movie, but they also have access to videos. They can see it at home. They can see it in the back seat of their parents' cars. Now they can see it on their phones. They can wear technology that can show them things.
Yeah.
So it's that repeated over and over and over again exposure that is the problem, because it becomes fixed in a child's head that this is the script, this is how the characters behave. But what makes it even worse is that, again, we go back to the business model. The way that media is supported, today, children's media, is through licensing. And so, it's not just going to see Star Wars, it's all of the Star Wars figures that are for sale, and Star Wars clothes, or SpongeBob SquarePants pajamas, Barbie this and that. I mean, it just kind of goes on like that. And so there's no opportunity for children to initiate their own play and to create play that is meaningful, to them. And play is important for all of us, but for children, because it's the foundation of learning creativity, constructive problem solving, and the capacity to wrestle with life to make it meaningful.
So where do you put video games in this saga? I mean, I know young children who shall remain nameless, whose idea of play is to play video games with their close friends. And yet the whole thing is scripted, not to mention often violent. So are video games, in your view, and I'm talking about video games that are not just solo, the kid and the screen, but two kids playing remote video games, is that corrosive of authentic play or what?
It's problematic, and it's problematic because it's being mediated by a corporation. So you know, kids who are playing Minecraft together, and one is, you know, who knows where, and the other is another who knows where. What they're doing is being mediated by a corporation. It's not two kids, and they're called sandbox games. Fortnite is another one. I mean, that kids really love, and I play Fortnite. It's, you know, it's fun, but it's also filled um, with advertising. I mean, not necessarily third-party advertising, although there's probably that as well. But, you know, to buy skins, like outfits for your avatar, to spend money on all of these virtual things. And they're, you know, and they're dropped, you know, online every who knows, regularly. I don't know how often. So it, you know, and the message is, I mean, you know, Fortnite is marketed as a free game. It's a freemium. So you can play a level of it. It's true, but what you're being told is that it's not fun unless you get the latest skins or the latest, you know, whatever. And Minecraft, what's happened to Minecraft is really sad. I mean, Minecraft had a lot of creative potential for kids. I mean, you could, you know, when it started out, you could build all sorts of amazing things, and you can do that. But now, you know, from what I've seen of it, it's more violent, and also it's the same kind of commercialism. So that's the problem. I mean, it's possible to create video games that are creative for older kids, not for younger kids, because younger kids, you know, babies, toddlers, preschool, they need to play with their whole bodies. You know, they need to explore the world with all of their senses. But I can see the appeal for older kids. But, you know, the problem is, you know, certainly the violence is often horrendous, but also that, you know, basically a corporation is, if not controlling, at least influencing how you play and what matters when you play.
So the medium screens could have constructive uses consistent with the development of real creativity, as in the case of when you watched Peter Pan and it influenced your play off screen. But
Right.
it's the fact that corporations are dominating this medium that makes it particularly insidious.
We don't have real public media anymore,
Right.
you know, for kids. I mean, you know, I as you said, I mean, I worked with Fred Rogers, and he wouldn't be able to get on the air today. And the way to keep things on the air is to license everything and, you know, sell them, you know, to kids. That's a problem. I mean, there was, or there still is, a center for, like, like the National Endowment for the Arts. There is in existence a National Endowment for Children's Television, but it was funded for 3 years and then never had funding again. So, so we don't, you know, there's lots of great programming for kids on public television, but so much of it is funded by licensing, and that's a problem. So you can't, there's no entertainment, screen entertainment for kids that isn't selling them something.
What sort of reception have you gotten when you talk about the book when you meet with groups?
I think that people are horrified. I mean, I really took, as I'm in the middle of doing with TikTok, I took a deep dive into how these things work. And I think that people are grateful to know. Parents are overwhelmed. And one of the things that I work hard in Who's Raising the Kids is to have a lot of suggestions for parents about things they can do to mitigate the harm. Again, really what has to happen is that marketing to children and the way that tech companies target kids has to be regulated. It's not going to change unless that happens. But positive social change takes a long time, and parents need help now. So
Do you have any allies whatsoever in the business community? Maybe not in the world of tech.
it's hard in the business community because there's a model for how you make money. I mean, if once somebody wants to make a profit, it's just hard, if not impossible, to do it. At least if you're making, videos or films or whatever for kids, it's hard to do it without doing things that are harmful to children. The FTC has been really, really good about this this issue now, and hopefully that will continue.
What has the FTC done?
Well, they're the ones who find Google for the advertising, for the way that they were advertising to kids on YouTube. I mean, that's a big deal. They just put out a whole treatise on marketing to kids and on tech that I thought was very good. Again, they're not. I mean, in 1978, the Federal Trade Commission came out and said that we should end marketing to children under the age of 8 and junk food marketing to kids under the age of 12. And they said that they were going to do it. What happened is that there was so much pressure on Congress from every industry who stood to benefit from marketing to kids that Congress actually defunded the FTC for a while and made it more difficult to regulate marketing to kids. And then in 1984, under Reagan, the FTC said that it was okay. Basically, what they passed or ended regulating children's television, and it became fine to create a program for the sole purpose of selling toys. So we have a really good FTC right now. There are people in Congress who at the moment are concerned about teenagers, but whether there will be the political will in the near future to really change things, I don't know.
Well, on that note, I would say you're doing as much as anybody to create the political will. Susan Linn's latest book is Who's Raising the Kids? Big Tech, Big Business, and the Lives of Children. And Susan, thank you so much for your work. Thank you for this conversation. I'm Bob.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, that concludes our podcast.